Jasmine Crockett just said the quiet part out loud. The Trump administration isn't just delaying the Epstein files, they're panicking. And once you see why, everything that's happened over the last 8 weeks suddenly clicks.
Since January, Donald Trump has used the full power of the federal government to attack Americans in cities across the country. In Donald Trump's America, you are at increased risk of experiencing militaristic operations in your home, increased risk of being subject to detainment by mass thugs and wannabe vigilantes, increased risk of suffering injuries due to reckless and illegal acts by rogue federal agents, increased risk of being deported to foreign nations even if you are an American citizen, and you're at an increased risk of being targeted by federal government for criticizing the president and his friends. Congressional Republicans have completely abandoned their Article I powers and have exchanged their responsibility to their constituents with fealty to the president. They have allowed the president to morph federal agencies into instruments of autocracy. And as a result, the president has been able to ignore federal law, disregard court orders, and implement the largest pay-for-play scheme in American history. The White House, well, what's left of it anyway, is literally up for sale. The federal courts have characterized this presidency as, quote, lawless. In fact, when ruling against illegal acts committed by the administration, a Republican-appointed federal judge stated, quote, the court cannot imagine how the public interest might be served by permitting federal officials to flaunt the very laws they have sworn to enforce. In a separate case where the administration was sued for unlawful acts, the judge, also a Republican appointee, stated, quote, allowing constitutional rights to be dependent upon the grace of the executive branch would be a dereliction of duty by this third and independent branch of government and would be against the public interest. But in another case, the court summed it up perfectly by declaring, quote, as is becoming far too common, we are confronted again with the efforts of the executive branch to set aside the rule of law in pursuit of its own goals. Judiciary Committee Republicans have been completely complicit in this corruption. But since they're so interested in restoring law and order, I have a couple of suggestions on where they can start. Number one, this is the President of the United States standing beside his best friend, Jeffrey Epstein. As we all know, Mr. Epstein is one of the most notorious sexual predators in American history. For 8 weeks, the Republicans on this committee have chosen to protect these two men instead of providing justice to Mr. Epstein's victims. Now the administration is panicking. First, they campaigned on releasing the Epstein files. Then AG Bondi and Associates did a photo op with the files. And she said, and I quote, the Epstein list is on my desk. Then somehow the Epstein list didn't exist. Then the Epstein files became a Democratic hoax. Now the president is supposedly supportive of releasing the files, even though he's currently ignoring a congressional subpoena to do so. Now the president is simply crashing out. And it's because he can't seem to explain his special decades-long relationship with one of the most prominent sexual predators in American history. It's already public that he's in the Epstein files, but his administration is hiding the context of his involvement, if any, with Mr. Epstein's horrific crimes. Now, this is Miss Ghislaine Maxwell. Miss Maxwell, who obviously helped Jeffrey Epstein traffic more than 1,000 women and girls. Well, Donald Trump is now giving her special treatment while she's serving out her prison sentence. He won't even rule out giving her a pardon or commuting her sentence. I don't need to explain why pardoning sex traffickers wouldn't be restoring law and order. Now, this is Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. Not only has Secretary Noem been busy filming propaganda ads, she's also been busy cashing in on millions of taxpayer dollars. In fact, Secretary Noem has funneled millions of dollars to a company called the Strategy Group. The Strategy Group helped Secretary Noem win her campaign to become the governor of South Dakota. Corey Lewandowski, her top policy advisor, has worked with the firm. And the company's CEO is married to Secretary Noem's chief spokesperson, Mrs. Tricia McLaughlin. This is what corruption looks like. They're stealing money from the American people's pockets and depositing it into their bank accounts. Now we move on to yet somebody else. This is the so-called border czar, Tom Homan. Mr. Homan is on tape accepting $50,000 in cash bribes stuffed in a brown paper bag from an undercover FBI agent. Apparently, Mr. Homan accepted these bribes in exchange for awarding federal contracts to his friends. Trump's Department of Justice killed the investigation into Mr. Homan's crimes, and congressional Republicans didn't say a mumbling word. Lastly, this is insurrectionist and Nazi sympathizer Ed Martin. It appears that Mr. Martin is functioning as the Associate Deputy Attorney General, Pardon Attorney, Director of the Fake Weaponization Working Group, and Special Attorney for Mortgage Fraud. All that means is that Mr. Martin is Trump's lapdog, whom the president sends to initiate lawsuits against the president's perceived political opponents. This is what we call organized crime. They're breaking the law, often by stealing taxpayer dollars, covering up their crimes by ending and obstructing investigations, then prosecuting people who call out their unlawful behavior. And while the Republicans are encouraging this corruption, they're abandoning actual victims of violent crime and ignoring the Republican-led state's 21st century murder crisis. In September's appropriation markup, congressional Republicans proposed reducing the FBI staff by thousands of positions and underfunding the agency by more than $1 billion. They've proposed slashing resources from the ATF. They've proposed cutting grants for juvenile justice programs and hate crimes and eliminating the community violence intervention and prevention grants. They're literally defunding the police. So no matter what they say at today's hearing, congressional Republicans have proven that they are not investing in keeping American communities safe from violent crime. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
What you just watched from Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett wasn't just another fiery moment on Capitol Hill. It was a flare in the darkness, a warning shot that something inside the Trump administration is unraveling under the weight of its own contradictions, cover-ups, and corruption. What makes this moment so striking isn't just Crockett's passion, it's the clarity with which she connects the dots that Republicans have desperately tried to keep hidden from the public. Because this isn't just about the Epstein files. This is about power, loyalty, and what happens when a president uses that power to protect himself instead of the American people. Let's slow down and unpack exactly what she exposed. For months, Trump, his allies, and his Justice Department have been playing a frantic game of hide-and-seek with the Epstein files. First, they confirmed the files existed. Then they denied it. Then they said the files were on someone else's desk. Then they called the whole thing a Democratic hoax. Then Trump publicly said he supported releasing them while simultaneously blocking a congressional subpoena demanding the same files. This isn't confusion. This isn't bureaucracy failing. This is panic. Crockett was right, this isn't about a list anymore. This is about decades-long relationships, interactions, favors, and connections that the administration has spent years hiding. The photos, the quotes, the timelines, the associates, they all form a picture that Republicans don't want the public to see. Because transparency doesn't just reveal information. Transparency forces accountability. And accountability is terrifying for those who have built a system that shields the powerful from scrutiny. But Crockett didn't stop there. She pulled back the curtain on a much larger ecosystem of corruption surrounding the Trump administration. She exposed the misuse of federal agencies for political purposes, the normalization of retaliation against perceived enemies, the funneling of taxpayer dollars into personal and political projects, and the willingness to elevate extremists, conspiracy theorists, and unqualified loyalists into positions where they can shape national policy. These aren't mistakes. These aren't isolated scandals. These are the structural features of a system built around one principle: loyalty to Trump, not loyalty to the country. That is why Republicans spent 8 weeks blocking the Epstein files. That is why oversight has been abandoned. That is why they can stand in front of camera screaming about law and order while simultaneously defunding federal law enforcement. And that is why the administration is scrambling now, as public pressure mounts and electoral losses loom. Once those files are released, excuses evaporate, contradictions are exposed, and the American people will finally see exactly who was protecting whom. Crockett made it clear, this isn't just about documents. This is about a culture of impunity that has allowed those in power to operate in the shadows for decades. Real accountability means confronting that culture. It means ensuring survivors get justice. It means demanding transparency from leaders who have spent their careers avoiding it. And it means reminding the public that corruption doesn't happen overnight, it grows when no one is watching. Your voice matters more than ever. Moments like this show that public